and welcome to episode 30 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I want to talk about this sort of like super cool thing called storyboarding. And now that I'm talking about it, you need to know that I did not storyboard at all for probably the first 3/4 of my writing career. And I so regret it because it is so amazing. So today I'm going to talk about the advantages I think are super important to all authors, whether you're a new author, a seasoned author, or anyone in between. So let's get down to it. Let's talk storyboarding. Alrighty then, today's story will be in 2 parts as always. In part 1, I want to talk about storyboarding before you write your novel or as you're writing it. And then in part 2, which I think is probably the most important thing, and that is storyboarding when you're done with your first draft. And to me, that is where storyboarding is like pure gold. So before we go on any further, let's talk about what is storyboarding. So for most of you, you've probably seen movies where you've seen production teams or whatever, and they've got the big board and they've got the scenes on the board. And it's actually pretty much the same thing when you're doing a novel. Each scene gets a card, and then the card gets put on the board in the order in which you have written it or you have the timeline going. Now, I'm going to talk about where to actually do your storyboarding before we get to the storyboarding part of this. So there are 2 different ways that most authors use to do their storyboarding. The first one, which is the one that I use, and that is a writing aid. I use Scrivener, and I love Scrivener, and I'm going to have a link to Scrivener in the description. And I will tell you, just as ahead of time, I am an affiliate with Scrivener, so I do get money from Scrivener if you actually purchase the Scrivener writing aid through my link. But there are other writing aids too, Pro Writing Aid probably has storyboarding, and I have personally never used it. They also have an affiliate, which I am not a part of, and I do not want to be a part of any other writing aid, affiliate program because I don't use them. And for me to be affiliate, meaning I am promoting this product, it's because I use it. I love it. That's why I promote Scrivener. So even if you don't get it through my affiliate link, it is an amazing tool, and storyboarding is one of the main things I love about Scrivener because you do the storyboarding on the computer, on the screen, and you just, move stuff around the way you have done, with your mouse, forever. Now, before I had Scrivener, I did the storyboarding on my wall, which is probably the biggest place that other authors, besides those who use, Scrivener and stuff like that, they probably use a wall or a board and they tack it up on the board or tape it up on the wall, which is what I used to do. So if you're going to do that, I would advise using index cards and a Sharpie. Sticky notes are good too. If you buy the rectangular ones, it's even better because they're bigger. And a Sharpie, in my opinion, is the best because it's really bold ink and you can see it when you stand at a distance to look at the whole board. If you're writing with just a regular pen, it's actually hard to read unless you write really, really big. And even with that, on those little square sticky notes, you can't write very much on them. So I would advise index cards and a Sharpie if you're going to be doing it on the board. And if you are computer savvy and you'd rather just do it, then use a writing aid like Scrivener. All right. So if you are a plotter, we're going to talk about storyboarding before you actually write your novel, and that is more for a plotter. So if you're someone who outlines your book ahead of time, and those of you who are nonfiction, this is probably you. Unless you're doing memoir, then you could be a plotter or a pantser. But if you're writing a nonfiction book, the chances are you have outlined the book. You know what chapters you want to cover or what subjects you want to cover, and you split them up into chapters. Maybe you don't know exactly, some subjects might be into more chapters or you are not sure about that, but you do have a general idea of everything you're going to be writing. And if you're writing fiction and you do an outline, then you've already got kind of an idea of what all the scenes are going to be. So what you do to storyboard and why it is an advantage for you as a plotter. What you put on each of the cards is this: a very, very brief description of the scene. And I'm talking super brief. Like if you can do it in just like a few words, just so that your mind knows what that scene is all about, just in writing like 7 or 8 words, well, then that's perfect. That's all you need. You don't need to go into great detail. But you also should put who is in that scene and where the scene takes place. And the reason I tell you to put the who and the where is because once you have set up your storyboard and you've got all your scenes there in the order it goes, that's when, before you write your book, you want to just get a general idea of, does this story flow the way I have it? And take a look at who is in the scenes. If your love interest doesn't appear until like scene 15, that might be too far into the book before you introduce your love interest. So maybe then, as you're looking at the scene where they meet, and it's so late in the book, before you start writing your book, you can look at your storyboard and you can kind of move that scene to be somewhere earlier in the book before you start writing the book, so that you have a love interest earlier on. And that is a really easy thing to do in a storyboard. And yes, you can do it in an outline too, but an outline is not as visual. You don't see the big picture by looking at it on a board, which is why production teams use storyboards, because it's easier to see on an actual board. And where to is important too, because if you're looking at this and they're at this, they're at this place, and then the next scene they're at this place, and then the next scene they're at this place, and suddenly you realize that you have no idea how they're getting from point A to point B to point C, or you might need to add a scene or move a scene around. And that's something you can do before you start writing. Now, if you are a pantser, things are a little different for you because you have no idea what's going on. And that, by the way, is me. I am a total pantser, have no idea what's going on. So most of you know, if you follow me on social media, that I'm doing like Novel November. And so part of my whole thing, if you've listened to my previous podcast, is I tell you, don't go back and edit, like just plow through forward. So when I do Novel November, I actually don't do the storyboarding, because if I do the storyboarding, it takes up too much time. I'm such a slow writer. I mean, for me to write the like 1,667 words for Novel November, it takes me at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours, because I write so slowly. And I have no idea where the story's going because I'm a pantser. So like what this Novel November, I'm going to give you guys like a kind of skinny on the situation. My mom actually suggested, I think it was 2 days before November, it was like October 30th. She's like, hey, maybe you can have them at the carnival. And I was like, oh, no, I kind of already have an idea of how I want it to go. And then on Halloween, I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, it would be kind of cool to have the kids at a carnival solving a mystery at like one of those traveling carnivals. So that's where they are. They're at a carnival solving a mystery. Do I know what's happening? Absolutely not. But I do know that that's where it is. So I try not to storyboard only because it takes too much time. But when I write during the rest of the year, when it's not like a rush for time, I absolutely love to storyboard. Because when you storyboard, you actually see the picture unfolding before your eyes, and you see the picture coming to life as you're looking at the storyboard. So I think storyboarding is pretty cool if you're a pantser as well. So the way you do it as a pantser is after you write a scene, you do exactly what you would do it for a plotter. You write the basic description of the scene and who and where it takes place. Now, whether you're a plotter or a pantser, once you get through that first draft, that is when this storyboarding becomes gold. So before I get to part 2 and storyboarding once you're done, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you're new to the show, every week in the middle of the episode, I give you a crazy law. And this was a law that once upon a time in history was a real law. And your job, or challenge, I should say, is to write a story based on that law. And it's just a good way to flex your writing muscles and maybe give you a distraction from your work in progress. Okay, here we go. This week's crazy law / writing prompt. In the state of New Jersey, it is against the law to slurp your soup. There you go. Why that had to be made into a law, I don't know, but that's the law. There you go. Have fun with it. All right, part 2, the gold. How storyboarding is gold when you are done with your first draft. Here we go. You're in the editing process, and this is where storyboarding is at its finest. You can look at the board, whether it's on Scrivener or on your wall or on a cork board, wherever you have your storyboard, and take a step back, and you can kind of see the flow of the story. And if you're using the hero's journey, which if you're writing YA or adult, then I would definitely advise you to use the hero's journey if you're writing fiction. But even if you're not using the hero's journey, it's time for you to take a step back and look at where are the turning points in the story. But the hero's journey, I'm going to definitely preach the hero's journey. We'll do a whole podcast episode on the hero's journey. It's really important because it really has like benchmarks of what you should be hitting at what point in your story to keep the story flowing in a way it needs to go for the hero to make his arc complete. So now, as you are looking at the story on the storyboard, because you can't really do that in Microsoft Word. I mean, you can't really look at the entire story on Microsoft Word at one time, but you can if you're storyboarding. You can see, is it flowing? Are there gaps? If you have action, if you have a book that has action in it, is your action too spread out? Is it too sparse? Do you have gaps in the action? Do you have 7 scenes where there's nothing but dialogue, and absolutely no action at all? Well, this is the point where you can say, hey, yeah, I'm missing some action. I need to throw some action in there. And then you can write a scene. And if you're storyboarding, you can stick that scene and you know exactly where, by looking at the storyboard, where you should stick that scene so that you can then kind of write how it goes from this scene to your new scene and from your new scene to the next scene. And that is really, really a great thing. So for example, for me, I can already tell you when I storyboard this at the end of my novel, November, I'm going to have to make some changes because I've been taking notes to myself because I'm not storyboarding. So I've been keeping notes so that I remember these things I think of. So for example, yesterday or the day before, my kids are in danger. They're in a room. They're actually in a trailer and the door becomes locked and there's like this major thing going on outside and they need to get out and they can't because the door is stuck. Why is the door stuck? They've been in that trailer before. If it wasn't stuck before, why is it stuck now? Or was it stuck before? I had to make the decision and I already made a note to myself that I need to make the decision that it was stuck before and they were supposed to talk to someone to unstick it and they didn't. But I have to then go back and add that scene. So that's the thing. If you're looking at a storyboard, you'll know exactly where you should add that scene in. It's a lot harder if you're just scrolling through Word trying to figure out where to add that scene. That's why the storyboarding is so cool because you can see it and then you can visualize where this scene would look really, really good. So when you write the scene, you know where to go in Word or in Scrivener, wherever you're doing your writing, and where to insert that scene. Now, the good thing about storyboarding is you can move things around to see if it looks better. Does it make more sense to have this scene here or there? And with storyboarding, you just literally click and drag and move it around to see if that looks like the story would flow better. Or if you're doing it on a board, then you literally just untape and retape and kind of move things around so you can see if scenes look better, if it makes more sense to move it this way. And I will say one last thing about this because I don't want this to go on and on forever. And that is, this is the time and storyboarding is the place where you can visualize your subplots. You have subplots in your story and looking at the storyboard, you can see where is your subplot lacking. So if you really haven't added any subplots, but you want to add like a sub storyline between this guy and his dog or whatever, looking at the storyboard, it's easy to see where you can kind of sneak in that subplot scene. All right, that is it for this week. If you enjoyed the storyboarding, which again, if you are going to do Scrivener and you haven't gotten it yet, but you're thinking, yeah, I really think that sounds pretty cool, please use my affiliate link. I would really, really appreciate it. I would get a few bucks out of it and I'd be so happy and you'll be happy because you're going to love the program. And if you are doing index cards, again, I would suggest a Sharpie just so you can see it a little bit clearer when you're standing back and looking at the whole picture. If you have an idea of something else you'd me to talk about, then please, by all means, drop a comment so I know what you guys want to see. You can also email me. Head to my website, albarango.com, and there's a contact me there, and you can contact me and let me know what you would like to learn about. Otherwise, please give this a like. I sure would appreciate it. And I drop a new episode every Wednesdays. So until then, be safe, and I will see you all next week.